evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in this global world. We are greatly honored to have you once again in yet another series of Humanist TV Africa, where we always thank our colleagues at Humanist Media Africa for giving us this opportunity to reach out to citizens in Africa as a continent, and also reaching out to the global citizen, using Africa and in particular Uganda as a case study on a number of issues that we share with you with regards to humanity. I would like to welcome you to the other, yet an interesting TV series where we are discussing something very important and fundamental with regards to food, as we appreciate that food is everything. Food is a foundation. We are all here. We must have taken in something, and either a glass of water, which is food, a banana, or any substance. Even our lungs have already taken in, whether we are sleeping or awake, oxygen, which is food for them, and which oxygen is processed and also facilitates all our other body parts, all organs, to make us living. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the management, all colleagues, in particular Dennis Bongole, producer, and all other hosts, wherever you are in the different countries on the continent of Africa. We have been rolling, and today we come back with an important aspect. Many of us will look at the domestic animals or the wild game or wildlife as an entity that just consumes whatever we reject. And we forget that the animal husbandry or the livestock is part of our food chain. They are species that are food producing animals. Once you give them junk, they will also give you junk. Once you give them quality, they will also give you quality. So today we would like to discuss the effects of aflatoxin on animal health and productivity. The health, we can relate it to human. Productivity too, we can relate it to human. Just imagine you eat food that is poisoned, you'll be unproductive. Just imagine a cow or a bull that is used in plowing and it consumes something bad. Will it be productive to take on the ox plows? If it's a donkey, it consumes something bad. Will it be able to do transportation? Most of us, in small scale, we have poultry at home. We have got piggery. We have got all other types of zero grazing. If you feed it with wrong food, as in feed and order will it be productive? And studies show, like Professor will tell us, the food we eat, when it is condemned and we give it to our animals and they consume it, when tests are done to their byproducts or to their products, they have found traces of contamination. So, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, using Uganda as a case study, I welcome you to yet another session where I would like to welcome Professor Kaya to come and share with us scientific and also share with us aspects in our day-to-day life. Later, I'll be welcoming Agnes Chirabo, the Chief Executive of Food Rights Alliance, an advocacy organization on issues to do with the right to food, issues of eliminating malnutrition in humanity. Then thereafter, I will be welcoming my colleague Bernard, with whom we work at Consent and also where he coordinates aspects of Food Safety Coalition. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have got a strong team to share with you experiences using the lens of agri-food systems, issues to do with before farm and after fork, in human and in animal. Food and feed are a foundation for our humanity. So, ladies and gentlemen, I open the floor for Professor Kaya to share with us. Professor, you're most welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hello.
Yes, please, Professor, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimed. I don't know whether I can be heard well because really my
We
network
are
is not
hearing
stable.
you and you're live on TV.
Okay. Hello, viewers. I greet everybody who is listening or seeing me and everybody. I want to thank Consent for this opportunity to continue yet talking about a very important issue of aflatoxin, and this time concentrating on animal, productivity, animal health. I want to welcome my colleague, Dr. Agnes Kilabo, who has also been a very good advocate of this important subject. My name is actually Okaya. I'm a professor at Makerere University, Department of Food Technology and Nutrition, and food safety is one of my areas of specialization, as I was introduced myself. Ladies and gentlemen, the subject of aflatoxin is very, very important because, as you are aware, aflatoxins have affected us from the health and economic points of view, and also they have also greatly affected the food security in this country. Therefore, this subject is very, very important because people are putting a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources, to produce food and also to rear domestic animals. But if you lose them because of poor feeds contaminated with the aflatoxins, that's very absurd. If we lose our crop and it's rejected internationally or even within the domestic markets, it's also very, very bad. Now, this time we are concentrating on animal health, as Mr. Kimera has indicated. Why animal health? The animal sector is very, very important to our economy, and the animal sector. So the animal sector is very, very important, although sometimes we tend to neglect it and then concentrate on the crop sector. And our domestic animals are very, very important source of food, especially protein. Now, what you give an animal is what it will actually produce in most cases. So we have to be very, very, very careful on ensuring that the quality of the feeds given to our animals, is what is expected. I can give a straight away example. I see these days, people feeding chicken and no, pigs actually on bread which has molded, bread which has remained unbought or which has gone bad, is collected or gathered from supermarkets and outlet, shops, and is taken to these places where it is concentrated, and then it is made into animal feeds. You can imagine that kind of, situation, meaning that people tend to think that animals can eat any junk, but who knows the molds that actually contaminate bread. There is a certain type of bread which I was eating at home, all wheat bread. But one time I molds which produce. I said no more. Yeah. Let me continue. Sorry about that. Why is it that animals also suffer from aflatoxin, poisoning? Because the feeds that are used to make animal feeds are mainly made from contaminated, maize bran, sometimes they call it broken, then soybean is also a very good candidate for aflatoxin, cotton seed cake, and then also mukene, because mukene silverfish is used as a source of calcium. Now, all those, once they are contaminated, and since aflatoxins cannot be eliminated during processing, even the animal feeds will be contaminated. And when the animal eats them, the metabolism is exactly the same as what actually happens in human beings. So the liver, gets affected, its enzymes are affected because the toxins, bind permanently on the liver enzymes, destroying it. And actually, as it struggles to eliminate the toxins, in the end, it gets, destroyed. So in that way, the animal's immune system, is lost. And then once loses the immunity, any opportunistic disease can actually come in and affect its health. And once the health is affected, like the layers, you have to be very, very careful. Once you affect the health, immediately they stop laying eggs. So the productivity in that way is actually affected. Secondly, it has been found that if you are to immunize these birds against, for example, Newcastle disease, the vaccine will not actually, respond to the disease. So all these are challenges that we have had. But most above all is the death that has actually been, recorded in most of these domestic animals. They die immediately, and once they die, definitely they have to be, destroyed. So many farmers have had that challenge, but because they cannot diagnose the feeds, since aflatoxins cannot be seen, using a naked eye, or can they be, smelled? You cannot smell. You cannot smell and actually feel that this feed could be having aflatoxins. So most farmers don't actually tell, and that has been the biggest challenge that we have been having. So last year, some of you might have read about the dogs, which died in Zambia. because people, made the maize meal, the posho, which they call it saza, something like that, made up of maize, which was actually contaminated, highly contaminated with aflatoxins, and several dogs died, because of that. So dogs, rabbits, poultry, those are highly susceptible, animals. The cows, especially the dairy, and then the beef are a little bit, resistant, but they also suffer once the levels actually, are higher than the optimum. So in terms of concentration, dogs, rabbits, and poultry, and also fish, theirs, the levels are a little bit lower that can actually cause acute toxicity. But the cows, the levels are a little bit, higher. I think it's because of the body weight that contributes to that. But in most cases, in terms of cattle, we are worried about the dairy animals because these toxins very easily end up into milk, especially if they are fed on dry rations, on concentrates, and also on silage, because some of the silage is made, by people who are not experts, and in the process of fermentation, it gets contaminated by molds, including those that produce aflatoxins. We are still lucky here in Uganda that most of our, our cattle, they are grazers. They graze on green grass. Green grass cannot actually have aflatoxins because the mold, Aspergillus flavus, loves mainly dried, produce. So you can never find it on grass. But for farmers who normally use silage and hay, chances are that if you have not prepared these, very well using carefully recommended methods, they can be contaminated by molds which produce aflatoxins. So we have to be careful. Right now, we don't have proper data on, on the exposure of our animals to aflatoxins, but this have been happening, and as I gave several examples, my dad lost 116 birds, and even records have been showing actually farmers complaining, of rabbits dying of pellet eating, pellets which are contaminated. But we need, I think, that kind of study in terms of research to find out exactly what exposure is, just like we have just done in terms of human beings. At least I know very well that Dr. Atkwase and the team have done a great job about exposure of humans to aflatoxins. So I end up there for the time being, but once again, I want to apologize for the poor network because I'm in a place where, network is not good. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaya. What a grounded curtain riser we've had. Getting science from wherever it is, and you bring it to our households. You don't need to get worried about the network challenges. These are issues that we are going to table to the chief executives of the communication companies next month when we are celebrating and observing the Consumer Rights Month. So in communication sector and digital finance, we will be meeting the chief executive of those companies. So we are going to use your case as one of the cases that we are presenting to them. That professor was sharing a very key issue to human life, and the communication and the quality of communication was good. So, Professor, thank you very much for bringing down the subject matter from up scale and bringing it down to the daily lives that we live. With that said, Dr. Agnes Chirabo, Professor, you did take on an honor, and we pray by the year of 2026, Agnes Chirabo is a doctor.
Yes.
But the honorary degree that doctor has bestowed on you today, your work and journey, the transaction, the narrative requires you to be a doctor. The campaigns you've done from your youthhood in the different professions or the different spheres you've been in, where you have brought humanity together, where you have lobbied policy, advocated both in the executive, in the legislature, in the judiciary, in the private sector, you're worth to be called a doctor. So, Agnes, it's a great honor to have you, and I would like you to share your advocacy experience, your nutritional experience. You are a farmer also, both directly and indirectly, how effects of aflatoxin can impact the health and productivity of animals. And human beings, we are also animals. So the floor is yours. Treat the subject matter to your best. Welcome, Dr. Agnes.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you so much, Professor, for the prophecy and also the honor bestowed on me today. I greet your viewers and thank Consent and Humanity TV for remaining human and for really dedicating this time to the critical issues when we are digging deeper. Besides the work that I do, I'm a social behavior scientist, and I'm consolidating myself in the aspects of human relations and human psychology and human behavior. And I want to take it from what I have seen to where we are. But before I do that, I'm also very happy that we have dedicated this particular show this week to animal feeds. Something that people have grown to believe that animals graze on shrubs and grasses. They are left to wander in the wilderness, choose what they can eat and leave what they cannot eat. We do not have a measure of traditionally whether the animals have adequately fed, that they are satisfied with the meal they've had in the day. The cows wander in the bush, the herbivorous animals wander in the bush, the chickens will wander around the courtyard and running after locusts and whatever few insects here and there. The dogs will feed on a few pieces of waste thrown to them on the ground. The fish was supposed to scavenge in the waters. This has been the traditional interaction between the traditional societies, at least in Africa, with the concept of animal feed. The coming of the piggery, again, these are animals that can feed on waste. People do not even care where they are feeding from. The concept has been either the animals wander in the bush or wander around in the plantation, graze, or eat waste. That's what people know, and that's what they have been practicing. While in the traditional households, people wash plates, at least among the societies where I'm coming from, there was a rack. You wash plates properly well, and then spread them on the rack. They dry properly. Every household, no matter the status, had something at least clean where they keep the plates, where they keep the cups. But when it comes to the animals, even the domestic animals, people don't clean the eating troughs of the animals, the drinking troughs of the animals. Because in their mind, in their social construct, animals and food safety and cleanliness do not meet. They can eat anything, they can eat anywhere. That's what people knew. But the agri-food system continues to evolve, where animals now are confined and they are supposed to be fed. The cows are on zero grazing, the chickens are closed in their structures, and it is incumbent on the farmer to provide feed for these animals. Unfortunately, while that part of management evolved, the part of feeding has not significantly evolved because the traditional relationships of humans and animals and their behaviors still think animals can eat anything, whether at industrialized level or at cottage level. If I could draw people's minds and they wander in their community psychologically, I think your mind lands on that place where they are. They call it a feed meal, where they are mixing, they're doing all sorts of things for animal feed. Please visit it if you can. Compared perhaps to a place where they are meeting human food. At least there is some bit of consciousness. Where they are dealing with animal feed, everything is on the ground. The birds are dirty, they are picked from anywhere. The birds are frequent visitors where the animal feed is being done. So even when we choose to industrialize in animal feed, we are still doing it in our traditional conscious way of dealing with animal feed. I know that there are quite so many farmers that pick that mixed feed for themselves, especially poultry farmers. My mother, the younger widow, with younger orphans, including myself, we used it to mix poultry feed. And we are doing it in the compound, bare ground. And I don't think that our household was unique. I know it is happening everywhere. So for me, it is an issue of people appreciating that giving this animal this condemned food now as feed, you're just prolonging the time for you to eat that feed. If you aren't able, it was condemned today that the bread is bad, has gone bad, we can't have it for breakfast. And then we say, throw it in the plantation for the chicken. Viewer out there, you're only saying, we are not eating this bread today. We shall eat it later when we shall be eating the chicken that are wandering in the plantation. And therefore, for me, if a viewer today would only appreciate one thing, that what the animals eat is what we eat when we eat them. And therefore, they deserve to be fed on safe feed, such that we find them or their products safe while we are eating it. Why I'm dwelling on that, Henry? You know, among the Baganda, they even have a saying, a proverbial saying, that if you want to think critical about what the chicken eats, you will not eat it. You get. So among these societies, they were appreciating that as the birds wander, they eat so many things that do not deserve to be eaten by human beings, and therefore, if we are conscious, we wouldn't have eaten those birds based on what they wander. I mean, what they eat while they are wandering. I'm therefore inviting consumers of animal foods, the eggs, the milk, the fish, the chicken part. I'm inviting you to interest yourselves in what these farmers are feeding these animals on. Professor and colleagues, if only you knew what fish farmers are doing to our fish. Personally, I resorted to only eating capture fish. It's terrible. And like the professor has said, we have had several fish farmers claiming that somebody may have sneaked and poisoned their fish ponds because they found all their fish on top of the water floating dead. Please, nobody poisoned your fish pond. You poisoned your fish while feeding them. So where do we keep our animal feed? Where do we buy the raw materials that made the animal feed? When the maize grains are condemned, then they are immediately transferred to the feed millers to make feed. Where are these feeds being mixed from? Where are the birds eating from? How are their eating traps looking like? How often do we clean them dry? Where do your pigs feed from? The pigs, by the way, do not desire to live in a dirty environment. The professors, the scientists tell us that these are animals whose fat is very close to their naked skin. Pigs too love a clean environment. They can't be given a cooler environment with clean water. They cannot tell you that give us mud. They just need to cool their skins and so the fats beneath them. So even pigs deserve to eat clean feed. Therefore, viewers, animals do not eat waste. Animals eat feed. The implications to your investment, Professor Kaya has already put it on the table. The implications to your house, we have discussed this over and over again. We are only going to guarantee ourselves a safe food system if only we all raise our civic consciousness to what we want to eat, to the safety of what we want to eventually see getting into our stomach. Then we are going to be keen on where it is coming from. It is very important for you to be very conscious about where the animal was slaughtered from, where it is being sold, the meat is being sold from. It's very, very important on the quality of the saucepan in which you're cooking the meat from. But this time around, we are inviting you to interest yourself in knowing and following and tracking what the food that you're going to eat, and in this case, the animal product, was fed on. Therefore, as I conclude, if it is not safe for humans, it isn't safe for animals, and it must be destroyed as recommended. Because if the animal eats it unsafe, you will eat it later. It is a matter of time. And we want this attitude to cross across the entire actors, including policy, those in policy, but also those in practice, that gone are the days where animals would wander and eat anything, where animals could be fed on waste, because now food is not just a solid thing on a plate. Food is livelihood, food is safety, food is security, food is money, food is sovereignty and credibility of not only a food system, but an entire governance system and an entire country. Greetings.
Agnes, thank you very much. And you see the applause of Professor Kaya, and also Bernard. Very soon I'll bestow on you Dr. Bernard, like the community does. Whenever we are moving, they call him Dr. Musao, Omwana Wangalichi, no Musao Wangalichi. But Prof. and Bernard, thank you for the applause. Agnes, you're a social scientist. Thank you very, very much. And I wish I can send it. No, I will send it to AU, because as you're speaking, it brought back 2 campaigns to 3 that we are in together. I'll start What Will We Eat Tomorrow, where we are looking at good food for cities and agriculture. Then AU, the Africa we want in 2020, in 2063, I will relate it to food. The Africa we want, how are we treating the animals that are part of the agri-food system? The Africa we want, the animals feeding Africans to be healthy, the 1.4 billion. So what kind of Africa we want, the way we are feeding our animals? Then you brought in, and it reminded me when we were developing standards, which Professor Kaya would be, because he's the chairperson of the technical committee on cereals and other products, grains and so forth. The El Nino that came in, when we first witnessed El Nino, and when I first heard El Nino way back, thinking either early 2000, where the importation of over 20 containers of rice that was soaked in, flooded in the internal container terminal. And it was brought to our committee. What do we do with this rice? When the levels were checked, the rice that was below couldn't be turned into animal feed. So the proposal was, let it be crushed into and just be used as fertilizer. That wasn't all that contaminated. Let it be processed into animal feed. But when the studies came in, as a country up to today, the quality of food and animal feed is equated together. There is no more saying this is contaminated, let it go to animals. We used that live example as a committee and took a decision. Quality of food and feed is the same, because once it becomes feed for animals, they are food-producing animals. And this has been something as a country we have been rolling out, bringing in the examples of homes. That means that we have not done enough for sensitization awareness for homes to start appreciating as consumers that food and feed should be equated together. So I just loved that as you were sharing, it brought all these into being. And as you were sharing the welfare of animals, the other day a colleague was telling me, even to the chicken in the poultry, there is music. I said, what? Music in poultry? I only knew that for cows. But I was told even chicken these days, they play music for them. And I said, wow, if somebody can play music for the chicken, then one can afford to feed them quality feed. Because that welfare of entertainment with music. So I liked all that you have shared. They shall not, it took me to the commandments. Thou shalt not kill. And the commandments mainly come in to humans. But Bernard uses that when he was taking food safety in church. I recall when he told people about the commandments, and all of you who know this commandment, but you are killing people every day. We shouldn't be all in church because you say, thou shalt not kill. And when you, Agnes, you said that if you feed your animals on stale bread or anything contaminated, you're postponing to eat it. Because once you feed it to the animals, by the time it grows, it catches up with you, whatever you gave the animals. So I loved most of the aspects, linking them to whatever Professor shared, and it was a good categorizer now to say that In the blue corner, it is Chimera, and in the red corner, it is Bernard Wambale. Now to share with you what are your perspectives in all with regards to animal feed and humanity. Bernard, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Henry, for taking us through that, and thank you, Professor, and now Professor Kaya and Dr. Kirabo. So I really feel happy that this conversation is really taking stake, and we are taking it far and wide, reflecting on this subject from the science, but also from the social science and from the behavioral kind of approach. I find it very interesting. Now, I now want to look at what the three of you have been discussing, and I bring in another kind of scientific perspective. Now, as a nutritionist, I realize now why we are still not about to run away from malnutrition in this country. Because from the realities of nutrition, Professor Kaya and I know that when people consume food that is having high quantities of aflatoxins, there is a risk that aflatoxins actually hinder the absorption of nutrients. And now, from the science, we know that animal products, they have a higher bioavailability of nutrients as compared to the plants. So, for instance, if someone consumed an egg, that child has a wider range of nutrients, micronutrients, that they're actually receiving from the egg. And so you realize that now, assuming that this egg is contaminated with aflatoxins, what that means is simply meaning that if the egg is having high levels of aflatoxins, the child will eat it, but the nutrients within the egg will not be available for the body to use. So even when we are promoting consumption of eggs, we need to be careful what the chicken are actually feeding on to avoid the eggs coming out contaminated with with aflatoxins. Because at the end of the day, even when you give a child 3 eggs, whatever it is, but the egg is contaminated with aflatoxins, all the nutrients, the micronutrients we expect from the egg, they are not going to be utilized by the child. And what that means, the child can even get into stunting, even when they are taking milk, even when they are taking eggs, even when they are taking meat, even when they are taking fish, just because of the contamination that comes along with aflatoxins. So when you're talking about animals, I feel more concerned because when you read back the Uganda Demographic Health Survey, and you specifically go and look at stunting, you will learn that actually stunting among the poor, the rich, the richest, all that was analyzed. But not surprisingly, even the children of the rich are actually suffering from stunting. We are talking about over 18% of children who are born from the richer families also having stunted growth, as compared, of course, to the national statistic of 26. So just imagine 26 being the national, and then the richest households also have 18% of their children having stunting. So now I kept on asking myself, why would the rich also suffer from the problem? And then from this conversation, I kept on now drawing back, looking at what the rich are eating, even when they're eating their eggs, but what is the quality of the eggs? Even when they're eating chicken, what is the quality of the chicken? Even when they're eating milk, what is the quality of the milk? They could be eating these foods, but these foods are endowed with aflatoxins, and these aflatoxins are hindering absorption of the nutrients, and so the children are not actually making value of the food because the food is highly contaminated with aflatoxins. So you see, as scientists, Professor Kai and Madam Agnes, you see we have a lot of work to actually to start relating these episodes from this whole thing. Because even when I was making I was challenging some statistics, and I said, okay, communities that are growing a lot of food, they are suffering from stunted growth. What could be these underlying situations that we need to dig down? And I realize that I think we need to start relating aflatoxins with the stunted growth in the different regions where we're coming from. Because I realize that the communities that are producing a lot of food, those communities perhaps have poor methods of handling the food. And so there is a risk that maybe the food is highly contaminated with aflatoxins, which is something that we need to actually study and maybe start relating these things. Because when Madame Agnes was speaking and Professor Kaya looking at the animal feeds and what comes out of those animals that have been fed on those feeds, and the people that actually feed on those feeds, I see that there is a whole kind of relationship in the value chain where we went wrong. People are eating food. Let us go back again to the Uganda Demographic Health Survey. It was indicating that people are eating many times, meaning that the frequency was good. Because we're talking about over 65% of children in the country were having more than 3 meals, which is relatively good because, you know, three times would be good. So the frequency was very good that people are eating many more times. But when it came to minimum dietary acceptable diets, it was a mess. That whereas 65 or so, I don't remember the statistics, but it was above 65. Whereas they're eating more times, but only 7% are eating a quality meal. So I'm now also still thinking, just imagine someone feeding on poultry, on egg or whatever, many times, but when they're actually contaminated with aflatoxins, there is a whole mess there. And when it comes to the health of our people, we see a lot of cancers increasing. Away from other contaminants in our food, when you look at the food we are eating, it's maize. Our animals are eating bran. We are eating the chicken, we are eating the pork, we are eating the animals. Now, the liver cancers that we keep talking about, remember, Professor Kaya, you know very well that the liver cancers have a great association with aflatoxins. Now, I am just imagining somebody eating maize meal, which perhaps is contaminated with aflatoxins, and they accompany it. Of course, you know, in Uganda, for instance, we have matoke. I have to be talking about Professor Kaya and Chiravo. If you're eating your matoke and you're eating with posho, you know how we eat here in our area. It is matoke, posho. But what is the accompanying sauce? It is ground nuts or chicken, beef, you know, or something like that. So you realize that your plate might be having contaminated maize with contaminated poultry, contaminated ground nuts. So how then do we survive this liver cancer thing? So it is until our people start recognizing that handling food is part and parcel of diet. Diet should not be looked at as the meal that is just being served. I think should really go back to the food system. How was this meal prepared up to when it reaches the consumer at the plate? And I think as advocates, every time we're talking about aflatoxins, we should be looking at it from the perspective of the food system, animals and plants. Because we like it or not, they will serve us ground nuts at lunchtime, but at break time, we would have eaten an egg. So if the ground nuts, which are the plants, are contaminated with aflatoxins, at lunchtime, you're eating an egg, which was also fed on bran from the contaminated maize. So you see, it's a whole mess. And you see in Uganda, it's very interesting that bran, which is supposed to be eaten by human beings, is actually eaten by pigs. No wonder they put on weight. Now, if the bran is coming from aflatoxin-endowed maize, and this maize is being fed now through bran to the pigs, and you know how many men and women in this country eat chikalaya, there is a likelihood that if we are not careful with animal feeds, then people are going to perish. Just imagine that around universities, around cities, People prefer eating chicken. You know, now we have the triple C, chicken, chops, and chips. Now, just imagine the chicken which is being fed on bran or whatever it is that is contaminated with aflatoxins, and that is the most consumed food around universities, around cities. Then it means that the health we are talking about, we are not yet about to achieve health for all unless we first deal with the issue of food handling. So the subject of aflatoxins should be dealt with the way we are dealing with highly hazardous pesticides. That is the attention we should give. Whereas the government is increasing a budget for cancer at the Cancer Institute, Madam Chirabo knows very well that this time the Cancer Institute has been given more money according to the budget framework paper 2025-2026. They have allocated more money to the Cancer Institute because there's trouble. But why should we invest money to address the cancer and we don't have the money to address where the cancer is coming from? So the issue of causal effect has to come in here. As we are allocating money, how much money are we allocating to proper food handling, awareness creation, capacity building, and handling issues around this whole subject? We had the aflatoxin strategy, but how much money did we put in this as a government, for instance, as civil society organizations? Where are we putting the money? Because we cannot start investing in health when we are not investing in the cause of ill health. So I think that we need to start correlating these things. Whereas you want to improve production, we need to think about what are those things that are actually compromising the quality of the people, that is actually leading to high burden of disease, that is causing a lot of problems to humanity. So I really love the fact that when you're talking about aflatoxins in animal feeds, I go back to relate it to the health and well-being of human beings. So I think that Chirabo and Professor Kaya, we see that whenever we're going for these sessions on stunting, on malnutrition, on micronutrient deficiencies, anemia, is it vitamin A deficiency, those deficiencies are actually having a relationship with this aflatoxin thing we are talking about, because people are eating, but people are not eating food that can be absorbed, that can be metabolized by their bodies just because they are highly endowed with aflatoxins. So this could be one of the challenges that we need to address to be able to respond to the malnutrition burden in this country. If we investigate that, we may find actually that the risk factor to the stunting levels, to the malnutrition levels, to the micronutrient deficiencies are actually aflatoxins. If you look at the statistics, we see that most of our women in Uganda are anemic, but these women are the cooks. They're the ones cooking food. They're the ones looking after chicken. They're the ones looking after the animals. They're the ones doing agriculture. Why should they be victims of this hidden hunger we're talking about? And yet they're feeding. The issue might be that they are feeding, but they are feeding on aflatoxin-rich food, which aflatoxins are hindering absorption of the nutrients. And so when you test them for anemia, they will certainly be anemic. When you test children for vitamin A, they will certainly be vitamin A deficient. When you check out for vitamin D deficiency, they will certainly be vitamin D deficient. When you check for zinc, when you check for folate, when you check all of those micronutrients, by the way, they are being stopped or hindered by aflatoxins from performing their duties in our bodies. So this malnutrition burden thing, there is no way we can talk about malnutrition without talking about aflatoxins. So we need to fight harder and make sure that the food we are giving to the population is free of aflatoxins, because if the aflatoxins don't get out of the food system, malnutrition will rise, hidden hunger will rise, people will die of cancers, people will die of hunger. Remember, there is no food and nutrition security without food safety. So let us aim at food safety for all and by all, and we make sure that the food is safe, because if it is not safe, it ceases to be food. Thank you so much, colleagues. That is the little I can share in the remaining time. Thank you so much, and over to you, Henry.
I always wonder why I look forward to Friday. And now I'm looking forward to next Friday. Bernard, that's why I said I'm in the blue corner. Now you are in the red corner. Now you've boxed me in my blue corner. It's not a technical knockout because I can speak. If it was a technical knockout, they'll be counting, I won't be speaking. But as we close, I would like to thank you because when Professor brought it out, grounded it, Agnes cascaded it, and now you have made us all guilty by shredding it. Because we are dealing with the symptom, the disease, but we're not dealing with the cause. And as I was listening to you, and then the way you brought it, Agnes and me, we have to go to the drawing table because Food Rights Alliance say a world without malnutrition and hunger. The way you have brought it, linking, I like the new concept, chicken, chops, and chips. And then when you said it, I draw it here. And I said, chicken has got aflatoxin, as in feed. Chops has got meat, which is fed on aflatoxin. Then the chips, if not well handled, Professor, if I don't use a scientific language, you will correct me. Have you seen Irish potatoes or potatoes with green? Is it kind of cyanide or something like that? When they turn green, they are not supposed to be eaten. So that is another damage to food. So aflatoxin was all there, but all of us, the four of us, were in a campaign of NCDs. They are all used in affected cooking oil. Can you see the jamboree we are in with food safety? The fat, the continuous fat, Professor, you have just concluded a study on cooking oils. Chips was part of the samples. Chicken was part of the samples. Fish was part of the samples. And all of these, the way Bernard was saying, fish is affected. Now, after being affected with aflatoxin feeds, now it goes into the cooking oil. What kind of vicious cycle are we living in? But I would like to thank you all for the sharing that has brought out. Bernard, you brought in the nutrition narrative, and this brought back the aspect. It is all our business. Sorry. That it brought out that food safety is everyone's business. I liked the three of you, the way you have localized the subject matter from food businesses now to consumers, looking at it and grounding it. I would like to thank you, the daily intakes you've brought, Bernard bringing in the statistics from UBOS. Wherever we are globally, we have related this to an aspect that is very key. So I would conclude by saying that in our discussion, in a way or two, research has ended up to be key for both Professor, you're in food science and nutrition, how eggs get challenged, then affecting all the vitamins intake and so forth. Awareness, 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 capacity building, and this also goes back to Agnes advocacy as in governance of food. So colleagues, today's TV series has been rich. And as we'll be ending the month of February, which is F, is food, it is feed. I would like to thank you. Next Friday, we'll be still doing the aflatoxin or microtoxin subject matter with regards to food and feed. So ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the global world, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Use Uganda as a case study. Localize it in your countries. You localize it in your homes. Whether you are in a least developing country, a medium class country, or you are in a developed country, most of the people in the developed country end up being malnourished because of eating over-processed foods that have lost out on nutrients. Just imagine if they have aflatoxin. So thank you very much, Humanist TV, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you a superb weekend. I would like to thank all my panelists, Professor Kaya, Dr. Agnes Chilabo, incoming Dr. Bernard Bwambale, in all your spheres. I always look forward to being with you on Friday. All the best, and let's keep sensitizing the world. Bye-bye, and God bless.
Bye. Bye-bye.